Jane Connor. Well, I'm from California originally, and in 1969, my late husband was an officer in the Marine Corps, and we pulled into Stafford County December 31st, 1969, and then he was stationed at Quantico for a while. We moved around, and then in July 4th, 1978, I moved into Aquia Harbor with my family, a son and a daughter. And my current husband, Al Connor, moved in with his family off 610, closer to the Fauquier border, July 4th, 1978. And so we didn't meet until his wife had passed away, and I was president of the Historical Society in 1996, and that's where we met, and we were married in 1999. Well, I remember when we were living in Dumfries when he was going to Quantico. The only place to buy anything was in Fredericksburg, so I used to go on Highway 1 to go down to shop in downtown Fredericksburg. And I remember driving back, and there was a historic marker by Aquia Creek off of Highway 1, and I pulled off the road to read it, and it said that Pocahontas was in the area, and Lincoln was at Aquia Landing. So I was thinking, oh, how exciting. I'm right here in this area where there was Pocahontas was kidnapped, and Lincoln was here. And my grandfather told me that my great-grandfather, his father, was a friend of Lincoln's from Illinois, that he lived in Illinois. And so I always loved Lincoln because I thought, well, my great-grandfather knew Abraham Lincoln. So that's what excited me about Stafford's history way back in 1960. That was in 1970 that I read that sign. Well, my very first book was about Government Island. And that story goes back to my children were very young. They were attending Stafford Elementary School. And I had a California teaching credential, and Sam Perry, the principal, then said, Jane, you can teach for us using that credential, but you're going to have to get a Virginia certificate. So he said, no trouble at all. At night you can go to Mary Washington College, take classes at night from 7 to 10 o'clock, and you can get it done. So I did that, but it was really rough getting the kids ready for school. I had one in kindergarten and one in second grade. I believe that's what their ages were. Getting them ready for school, getting their clothes all set out, coming back home, cooking dinner for the family. And my husband at that time was at the Pentagon, and so he always would come in late, but he always wanted a different dinner, cooking him a different dinner. Then driving down to Mary Washington from 7 to 10, coming back home, going to bed, getting up the next morning and doing the same thing over and over again. So that professor, Jim Vance, was wonderful because he found out about my plight, and he said, why don't you do an independent study where you don't have to have this routine every day, and instead do research up in Washington, D.C. And he said, do it on any topic of history. And I said, well, there's an island in the harbor in Aquia Harbor. There's an island, and some people call it Governor's Island, other people call it Government Island. So I'd sort of like to do research about that. So that was in 1979. I did research up at the archives and up at the it was the curator's office at the United States Capitol. And here I found out that it was purchased by the government in 1791 by Pierre L'Enfant, and it's where they quarried the stone to make the White House, or the President's Mansion as it was called at that time, or the President's House, and the United States Capitol. So that led to me writing a paper, and the architect of the Capitol, Mr. White, said, I want you to give he saw me up there all the time, and he asked me to send a copy of my paper to all the libraries, so I did it. A neighbor of mine was the head of the Aquia Harbor property owners, and she said, why don't you show me your paper? I'd love to know about this island, because the island is all divided off into home lots. And I purchased one of the lots, she said, already. And at the end of my paper, I said, when you can see the pick marks made by slaves over 200 years ago and see the history etched into the stone, and to realize that tons and tons of this stone came out of this island to make these historic buildings, it really should be preserved. So she gave a copy to the attorney for both Westinghouse Corporation, who owned the Aquia Harbor at the time, as well as the attorney for the property owners. He read the paper. He thought that the island should be saved, so he purchased the island for $10 in services rendered. And I thought, oh, hallelujah, my paper saved this wonderful island. I was so pleased. And the attorney moved down to Richmond. 12 years later, that same neighbor told me that he wanted to sell the island. So the property owners told me that I should go down to Richmond and ask if we could purchase the island, considering he got it for $10 in services rendered. Well, I go down there, and he had a lovely old wood paneled place. He was dripping in gold Rolex watch and gold chain and everything. I thought, ooh, I hope he's going to give it to us for $10, you know, again. And he said that the Japanese are purchasing historic properties in America, and he knew the Japanese would buy this. So he wanted to sell the island for $410,000. I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe that at all, that he wants to do that. I came back home just more or less shaking when I was driving the car, and I told the property owners, they're the president of the Property Owners Association, and they said, Jane, there's just no way at all that we can buy this property. So they said, maybe if you ask for, we say that we'll name it after him, and then he'll give us a lower rate. Well, I went down several times. He lowered it to $250,000. Then that was still so much money. So the property owners couldn't purchase it for that. So I went to the National Park Service, the Conservation Fund, George Washington. Ferry Farm was owned by George Washington Association at that time, the Warren family. Turned it over to the county or whatever, and so went there. No one had that kind of money. So I was really gutsy then. I went to the White House. I called up and asked if I couldn't speak with the curator of the White House. And so I met Rex Scouten. He had been there from President Truman to Clinton. And so I told him our situation, and he said, Jane, I want you to come back next week for lunch at the White House. Oh, I was so excited. And he said, and I'm going to look at all of the papers that we have about the island, and we're going to examine the papers and determine our next course of action, because I want to help you, but we have no money here to buy it, but we'll find out a way. So went there. I was so excited to go in for lunch, sat down, and he throws down at the table, these are all the papers that we have about the island. I looked down there. There was my paper that I had written 12 years before. So he said, that's all we have? I said, how did you get it? And he said, well, I send my scouts out to different libraries. I think we probably got it from a library. So anyway, he said, well, I'm going to contact the former Governor Robb of Virginia, because, you know, he married, was it Lucy Bird or Linda Bird or whatever? And so I think it was Linda Baines Johnson. He married her. And since he was governor, he'll probably know how we can contact this attorney. So he found out that the attorney probably would like to go to the White House and have lunch there. So he invited the attorney to go there for lunch. And it was also the time that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was being sworn in at the Rose Garden at the White House. So we thought this was perfect, that he'd lower the price. Well, I think he only lowered it $10,000. I think it went down to $240,000. And he still, no one could purchase it for that amount of money. And years went by, and it was a shame, because then I read in the newspaper that he went to Coldwell Bankers out on 610, put it up for sale for $410,000. Again, up there. No one purchased it. And then in 1998, I got a phone call from the Conservation Fund. They had remembered me from all the years before, and he said that this attorney had called them and asked the Conservation Fund to buy it because he had lowered the price to $200,000. And he said, I told them no, we couldn't afford it, because I wanted to contact you, because I know that you in Stafford County really wanted to purchase this island. So I contacted C.M. Williams, who was the county administrator at that time, and he went before the Board of Supervisors. So in 1998, the Board of Supervisors purchased the island for $200,000 from the attorney. So it was saved. And then gradually, C.M. Williams asked Rex Scouten to be in charge of a government island committee to determine the best way to preserve the island. And on this committee, I was just in awe of the people that were on there. Like a former curator of the architect of the Capitol, was on the committee. A person in charge of everything, fine arts, everything that goes on the mall went through him. Calder Loth from Richmond, Historic Preservation in Richmond. But all these distinguished people, and Rex wanted me to be on the committee, and I was on the committee along with C.M. Williams. So we met for a year. Most of the time we went up to, Bob Capps from Habs Hair was up there, but we met up in D.C., and we had one meeting here at our home too. We had lunch here, and I wish I would have recorded it to have all these fabulous people there. But they said that it should be a low-impact park that should not go through Aquia Harbor because we didn't want their traffic disrupted by them going through. So in 2010, we opened up Government Island Park, and there's now a wonderful walkway going to the island, and we have historic markers based upon my book all throughout the park. So it's just wonderful that now so many people can witness Stafford's remarkable history of that island, and it's open from sunrise to sunset, and they estimate there's over 100 people a day, plus many dogs, that come to visit the island. So I couldn't be more pleased. So it was over a 30-year journey, but well worth it to have it preserved and open to the public.